Hello and welcome to another episode of KSP Real Solar System Campaign. We are now back with another rocket that we're going to attempt to launch into orbit and then re-enter afterwards. Since we failed in our previous attempts, I made some modifications to the final spacecrafts, but you're going to see that in a minute once we get into orbit. So we're just going to start the launch of this one. Let's go for engine ignition. And we have liftoff. It's pretty loud, this rocket. So, but you've seen this launch sequence before, so let's skip ahead to the action. We are now back with another spacecraft, which is more or less the same as the previous spacecraft we tried to re-enter it. The only addition here is to have these fuel tanks being detachable. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any connection to the ground station, so we can't actually detach these. So the point was to shed some weight off the spacecraft, which might make re-entry a little bit easier, but that didn't work out, so I guess we'll just have to live with this. The atmosphere is starting to really have an effect on our spacecraft right now. Periaps has dropped from 97 to 94 kilometers. Apoaps is at 155. I don't think this should have any trouble re-entering. I mean, I don't think the is going to be too. The re-entry is definitely not going to be too shallow. I'm more afraid that it's going to be too steep again, even though we. I mean, I tried to lower the periaps down to 97 kilometers. I don't know if that was too low, really, or if we should go for an even higher altitude. Our apoaps was much lower this time though than in the previous launch, so probably a good sign. Instead of detaching the fuel tanks, you might actually. It might be a better idea to burn up the RCS fuel, so we're going to do that just to try to keep the spacecraft stable in the right direction, which will shed. Now, if I fire them, I think I'm going to drop a bit faster, which is not really what I want to do. We are now approaching 80 kilometers, and at this point our velocity is really starting to slow down, and we are starting to get some of the heat effects on our heat shield, and you can see that it is definitely starting to ablate away now. The question is, will this heat shield reach the maximum temperature? Because that was really the problem in the previous launch. We had plenty of heat shield left to absorb the heat and ablate away. The problem is that we hit our maximum temperature, which made the entire spacecraft explode. And it definitely looks like this is going to be a successful re-entry. G-forces has peaked at, what is that? Between 8 and 9. And we are down to 37 kilometers now. Velocity is less than 2 kilometers per second. And the only thing that can really stop us from having a successful re-entry at this point is a failed parachute deployment. But if we take a look, well, I can't look at the parachute info, but you can see that both parachutes are armed and they should deploy around 8 kilometers of altitude. Going below 10 kilometers now. Let's see. Will the parachutes deploy like I told them to? Yep, there we go. Parachute deployments. You can just barely see them, but this is a successful re-entry at last. It just took a couple of attempts, or this is really our second attempt at an actual re-entry. We're going for a wet landing as our parachutes have fully deployed. After successfully completing the re-entry mission, we now have 51 science points to spend. So we're gonna have a look at our different options. This construction thing, well, it does have a lot of heat shields, and they do have a higher max temperature than the heat shields I already have. But I don't think that's what we need right now. This, on the other hand, stability / early probes. So looks like it could be really useful. It has a couple of science experiments, again RCS, antenna, and solar panels. So this is definitely what we need. So we're going to research that. And we now have 31 points, which we could spend on staged combustion. The next thing we need to do now is design a spacecraft that will actually be capable of both doing a lunar flyby and hopefully do an impact as well against the lunar surface, so we can complete both of those missions in one go. And we're going to start off with this early controllable core, and since it has a 200 kilogram weight limit, we're going to use 2 of those. Next thing, we're going to need some propulsion for this, and I'm thinking that RCS propulsion is the most suitable for this size of spacecraft. And so we also need, we're going to need the most powerful antenna we have available for this mission, and we're going to need some power generation. So I'm going to add this octagonal strut on top of the spacecraft, and then this parabola at the end, which is the most powerful antenna we have. Next we'll need solar panels, and we're going to put as many of them as we can and pray that they will generate sufficient amounts of power for the translunar injection burn, which is going to be the entire purpose of this third stage. I think we need something like 3.5 kilometers per second of delta V, so we need to design our rocket around that. I think we could use this pressure-fed engine on this third stage. We just need to make sure that this is a service module. Yep. And let's see how much delta V we get out of this. That is 2.6 kilometers, so that's not too bad. And if you go to 3 meters, you get 3.2. Let me just adjust this design a little bit. Make this a cone. So we now have well, actually I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. It is like this. This should have more than enough fuel. You can reduce it like that. So this has 3.6 kilometers of delta V. We are well on our way to finalize the design of this rocket. We just need to figure out how big the first stage has to be and what kind of rocket we're going to use for it. And if we have a look at some of the options we have, this is a 3-meter first stage, by the way. If we use this RD107, we just try to experiment a bit with delta V we get out of that. So this has 5,000, 3,500, 8,500, or a little under that. I think we need more than that. And this does not have sufficient thrust to weight ratio either. So we need a more powerful first stage. We could go with try 3 of these engines maybe instead, and the appropriate fuel mixture. We get this to 4,800 and a sufficient thrust to weight ratio. So that gives us well, this is going to be under the effect of the atmosphere, so we have now gone up to a rocket with 4 of those engines instead of just 3 of them. And we are going to increase the size of the first stage a little bit, and then also the second stage, so that we can actually get up to our delta V requirements. The Progress 2 rocket is now ready to launch, and this is definitely the biggest booster we've built so far. So let's hope it doesn't blow up. Go for engine ignition and release the clamps. So initially we don't have any control over the rockets because it's too heavy, but that problem should be solve itself once we start burning out some fuel, and we're already at the point where we have assumed direct control over the rockets. So we're just going to start turning our gravity turn basically. And, we are accelerating quite rapidly actually. We are already 6 kilometers now, and the velocity is at 400 meters per second, approaching 10 kilometers. Velocity is at 500 meters per second. We're at about 50% of the fuel in the first stage as we approach 20 kilometers of altitude. 800 meters per second of velocity. So I do think this is going to be a decent launch, and we actually need to turn more aggressively now. Apoapse is at 80 kilometers now. Actual altitude has just passed 40 kilometers. Velocity is at 1.8 kilometers per second. Apoapse at 120 kilometers. As we start turning a bit more aggressively. And the first stage is also getting close to cut off. Yeah, we didn't turn aggressive enough in the gravity turn this time. But that's, well, it's not too bad though. We have an apoapse, so 167 kilometers. And it is now time to launch the second stage. We're going to decouple the first one, fire the Euro thrusters, and then fire the main engine of the second stage. And get that pointed in the right direction. I'm also going to get rid of these fairings. And we're going to burn for a little over 2 minutes now on this stage. I don't know if I started this burn a bit early, or I could have waited with the stage separation a bit more, I think, but this should do. And we are flying over the Atlantic Ocean now, as the second stage is about to burn out, and I think it's going to make it into orbit just barely, though it's going to be a close call, and we'll cut the engine there. And oh yeah, well, it wasn't really a close call. I mean, we had a pretty good margin, 173 meters per second of delta V left in the tank. So we now set our sights on the moon and see if we can't plot out a course. So if we just try to put a maneuver node here, and you can see that the moon is tilted over. That is really more of a simulation of the Earth's tilt. But if we stretch this out, we'll see if we get an encounter. Yeah, it looks like we're going to make it to the moon. Oh yes. We get a pretty nice approach. Let's see how close we can get with this one burn. We're going to approach the node in 16 minutes and 45 seconds. The burn time of the third stage is 4 minutes. But it does have 600 meters of delta V more than we need to actually perform the burn. We are now 1 minute and 40 seconds away from the burn node, so we are going to decouple the second stage and get ready to launch the third one. I'm just going to fire it up. This again is a pressure fed engine, so it doesn't actually need any ullage thrusters. You can just fire it up. So once we cut that engine, we better make sure we're on the correct course, because we do not have a lot of maneuvering capability with the spacecraft itself. It just has a little bit of RCS. And just going to keep burning. Actually going to delete the maneuver node now and get ready for cutoff. Oh, yeah, that is why this is so difficult, because I mean, I had to do this manually, and but we can make some course adjustments, I think, with just decouple now. And if we take a look at this, we only need to make some minor adjustments in order to hit the moon. And let's see if we can't get this thing a little bit closer than, well, 368. No, that is... Let's have a look. What? So, oh, the moon... Yeah, there we go. The moon periapse is going to be, if you just fire the RCS thrusters a little bit. is that 3.7 million kilometers from the moon. That's not too bad. And I think we're going to make some course corrections on the way so that we can go on a collision course with the moon to accomplish our lunar impactor mission. We are burning some of our RCS fuel now to get a closer approach to the moon. I'm basically just guessing a little bit with the direction that those RCS thrusters should be fired, and I would really like to get our periaps down to space as close as possible to the moon, collect some science data there before we do our impact. Let's see, I'm just guessing here really. We actually have a lot more spare fuel than I thought we would have. So if we could get our periaps down to about 20 kilometers, I think that would be a nice spot. Oh yes, here we go, here we go. Oh, that's a little bit much. Yeah, our RCS thrusters are actually quite powerful for the size of this spacecraft. Oh, that's too much again. Okay, 26 is good enough. So we are going to go for well, I'm just going to wait for our spacecraft to actually approach the moon. And if we have a look at well, let's see, we should be able to spot the moon pretty soon. Maybe I'm blind, but I can't see it. So we have the Earth in that direction. Is it above us? Yeah, maybe that's what it is. No. Just going to go for an even closer approach. And we have no real problems with the electrical charge. I'm also going to gather some science data from here. And we are getting close to the moon's sphere of influence. So, yep, there we go. Now we are in the sphere of influence of the moon, which of course you can see right there. So we have even more data to gather from this area, and we're just going to do that. It's going to give us a lot of science and a lot of new exciting modules that we can use for our spacecrafts, which also means we can accomplish new and more complex missions and gather even more science data, which is really going to be the campaign of this, well, not the campaign, the goal of this campaign: complete successively harder missions, and hopefully maybe one day actually make a landing on the moon, a manned landing, preferably. Although that's going to be hugely challenging. Another near-term goal that I want to accomplish is build up a satellite network, because as it is now, it is a bit tricky to be within range of a ground station on Earth at all times, because I had to with these active antennas, you have to select where it's going to gather its signals from. You have to activate it and then point it somewhere. And we have just pointed it in towards the Earth. And at this altitude it's not a problem, because there is always a ground station within reach on Earth. And as it happens, I started speeding up the time warp a bit too much. So now we came way too close to the moon now on that burn. Although at least we can start gathering some more science data. Although I don't think we're going to achieve the lunar impactor mission on this try. I mean, we really don't have the capability of going into orbit and slowing down enough, or well, just change our direction enough to actually collide with the moon. But we are going to make the best of this mission, even though I kind of screwed up. And as you can see here, I did try to slow down the spacecraft, but it wasn't really going to work out. I mean, those tiny RCS thrusters were never meant to do orbital insertions and such major course corrections like we'll have to do now. But there is still hope for this spacecraft. It can still accomplish an important mission, because the spacecraft is now, as you can probably see, about to leave the Earth system and go into interplanetary space once it has left the zero influence of the moon. So we can still use this as a interplanetary probe to gather science data from interplanetary space. So that is going to be the new purpose of this lunar probe. Just left the moon, the moon's sphere of influence, and we now will try. Well, we're going to go for a launch into interplanetary space. So the spheres of influence are messing with us quite a bit. But this, yeah, I don't know why that is happening. But this should have no problem in just going straight out into Earth escape and into interplanetary space. So let's just zoom ahead for that. There we are. We are not orbiting the Earth anymore. We're orbiting directly around the Sun. And this, of course, means we can gather some new science from all our modules. So we failed one mission, but we turned the failure into a success in this case. And all that science we gathered amounted to a total of 205. So now we have a lot of new exciting science nodes we can research. So we can go for mature orbital rocketry, and we can go for general construction, flight control, basic capsules, and I think we can go for all of those, and also improve instrumentation. This will add some more antennas, or not just one more antenna, radiator panels, and improved solar panels, and we're going to go for that. And we're also going to go for basic capsules. So we're now going to start our manned space program, which we up until now have not even attempted. So let's research that. and general construction, we can take that. Advanced construction, it's not. I think mature orbital rocketry is going to be more useful for us at this point. So we go for that, and maybe some basic solids. I don't know. I don't think solid rockets are going to be that useful. We could go for flight control, which adds a small inline reaction wheel, docking port, some more RCS thrusters. So we're going to go for that as well. But that will be it for this episode of KSP Real Solar System Campaign. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in another video. So bye and take care.